Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very much, as always, for taking the time to tune in to this particular episode. And today I'm delighted to be joined by author, podcaster, and founder Dr. Loretta Breuning, who is here to discuss how we can rewire or retrain our brains for our own good. Dr. Loretta is the founder of the Inner Mammal Institute and author of Habits of a Happy Brain, Retrain Your Brain to Boost Your Serotonin, Dopamine, Oxytocin and Endorphin levels. Dr. Loretta believes that our happy brain chemicals are not designed to be on all the time, and when you know what sparks them in the state of nature, you can find healthy ways to spark them in daily life. While acknowledging that it is hard, as our brain is inherited from ancestors who had to struggle constantly to survive, there are some key concepts that are important to understand. The first one being that our chemicals are designed to reward us for taking action to meet our survival needs, and secondly, our unhappy chemicals turn on easily because our ancestors lived in a world of threat. Managing these chemicals is a skill we must learn from practice, like any other skill, and Dr. Loretta can teach us how, so that we can enjoy our natural dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin and endorphins in new ways. Dr. Loretta's 10 books have been translated into 18 languages, and she has her very own podcast called The Happy Brain. Dr. Loretta's methods are all positive. It's not about disorders, it's not about diet, exercise or mindfulness. It's about accepting the natural job of your chemicals so you can guide your mammal brain the way a rider guides a horse. I love that analogy. Dr. Loretta, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Hi, so nice to be here.
Excellent, thank you. So I'd like to start with a little bit of the journey that got us to this particular point, and specifically what sparked your passion for helping people understand the behaviors, if I could say, of the brain.
Sure. Well, like every brain, I wanted to be happy, and I was not happy all the time. And so we all try to figure out, what do I need to do to be happy? And what I had learned since I was young is that if you follow social science and do everything by the book of social science, then you'll be happy all the time. And as you could probably guess, that didn't work for me. And then I had children and thousands of students, and I was following the book of social science, and they were not happy all the time. So that's sort of what motivated me to look deeper and figure out what was going on. And books about the brain were increasingly common. And in one book, I read one little mention about what sparked these happy chemicals in animals. And another book had another little mention, but no one put the pieces together, connected the dots. And I suddenly saw that this is how the brain works. And I wish I knew this when my kids were young and when I was teaching thousands of students, but I'm glad to be able to share it today.
Yeah, me too, me too. And when we had the chance to pre-chat prior to recording, we were talking about the behaviours of mammals specifically and animals in a more general sense, and the fact that how they make choices and how they behave as they behave and such. So prior to getting into the meat of the conversation, can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's make believe you're a monkey and you wake up in the morning and you're hungry. Hunger is cortisol, which is the body's alarm system. And most people have heard about it in the context of predators and traumas, but it's just the brain's signal that a need is not met. So a monkey is hungry in the morning and it doesn't expect somebody else to feed it. It has to look for food. So it looks around, and when it finds food, its dopamine turns on. And that's the great feeling of excitement that we humans are always looking for. And because in the modern world our need for food is met so easily, then just finding food in the morning doesn't excite us that much. So we want more. But, obviously, first, oh, I want to get a bagel or a bowl of cereal. At least you get a little dopamine from that, but then soon it's over. And now it's like, now what can I do to be excited? And we might view that as problematic. But when you understand that that's normal, that that's dopamine's job, is to get you taking action toward a goal. And then once you reach the goal, it stops, and then you have to take more action. So blaming the cereal company doesn't solve your problem. You have to understand that good feelings evolved to motivate you to step forward toward a goal.
Yeah, and I do love the science behind it. I don't profess to understand everything about it, and science is hard. Science is hard for some people anyway. So could you explain how understanding the role of serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins, how they interact or interplay with each other, how we can start to really understand those at the core and how they manifest themselves into our desires, our behaviors, our actions?
Sure. So, what I'm going to say is not what you hear from academic psychology, as I've explained, which is more toward um, it's always it's not your fault explanations that you get from establishment psychology. So, the simple answer is that these four chemicals that you mentioned, which people have all heard talk about, but are explained very different in either they're medicalized or they're given some kind of spiritual twist. But if you know the job they do in animals, the simple answer is that first, an animal's trying to meet its physical needs, and once its physical needs are met, it tries to meet social needs. Now, the social needs of an animal are not spiritual or metaphysical, it's reproductive success. And that's a term from biology. I didn't make it up.
Yeah.
So none of us go around saying, oh, I want to be a reproductive success. But in the past, people were motivated by leaving behind as many children and grandchildren as possible. But in the modern world, we've reinterpreted that. There was no birth control in the past. So we've reinterpreted that. We obsess over our appearance. We obsess over whether our partner is as hot as somebody else's partner, and then we obsess over whether our children are safe because the survival of our genes depends on the protection we have for our children. Now, these social needs are met by oxytocin and serotonin, but in two very different ways. Very simply, oxytocin is the mammalian urge for a herd, which again, to avoid that higher values connotation, animals are not supportive and loving of each other. They go to a herd because they want to be in the center where the others are surrounding them and protecting them. And then serotonin is they don't want to be at the bottom of the status hierarchy in their group because then they don't get mating opportunity. So I've gone on long enough, and that's the cruel facts of life.
I love it. And the analogy of I have this vivid picture in my head of, the herd type atmosphere and, the person saying, come in, come in, come in, come in, and just be surrounded so they're fully protected. And, the other people on the outside are saying, wait a minute here. I thought I was in the inner circle. I thought I was part of the crew. And now I just realised that I am literally the last line of defence to protect this person. And they might not even realise that until they're actually being chased down or something. And then just in terms of the social structure and the opportunities that either are or are not present, depending on your standing in the social structure, it's literally the same for all mammals. I'm talking about specifically humans now. I did have the vision of the monkey, since you mentioned monkey earlier, and so there's that relevance. Of course, it's the same species, but it's one of these things. I hadn't really thought about it in that type and style of context. So where do the humans primarily differ from you used such an eloquent word, mammalian, our animal counterparts in terms of our reaction to or usage of each of the chemicals? What would you say is the biggest difference?
Sure. So we humans have two brains. We have the brain we've inherited from earlier mammals, which controls our chemicals. It's called the limbic system. And then we have the big pink fluffy brain on top, which controls language and abstractions and thoughts about the future. So the model you hear in public is suggesting that you shouldn't let your emotions control you, that you should rely on this big pink fluffy brain that you have on top. But that's not how the brain works. So the mammalian limbic system that controls the chemicals, and the chemicals control your body. So your verbal brain can't control your body. And that's how people know in daily life when you tell yourself, I want to do this, I want to do this, and yet you do something else.
Yeah.
So that's why we need to understand how we have two separate brains, and that the nonverbal brain has much more power than you think. And the simple way to understand that is that your mammalian limbic system sits on top of it's in the middle here. It sits on top of your spine. It controls your body, which includes the emotional chemicals. So your talking brain can only sort of whisper suggestions to your mammal brain and sort of structure your environment, like giving a horse carrots or sticks.
Yeah.
But it's not the horse, So you have to keep managing the horse. And the way I always explain it is, if you yell at the horse, that doesn't work. You could recite poetry to the horse, but that wouldn't work either. So you have to understand that it's a horse.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so well put. So if you're having a situation, say Gary is having some circumstances or situations where, your example earlier, where I say I'm going to do one thing because I know that's the right thing to do, and I regularly or consistently do something else that's in complete contrast to that doesn't serve me or others, how do I take the first early steps to understand what I'm doing, to understand why I'm doing it, and then start to train my brain towards healthier patterns?
Sure. What was so helpful for me is learning from animal trainers. So animal trainers have written a lot of books and made a lot of videos, and they have public courses. So anybody can learn from animal trainers. So if you go to a dolphin and you say, if you do a triple flip in the air, I'm going to give you a big bucket of fish. The dolphin will not do a triple flip in the air because it has no idea what it is. And it's the same way with ourselves, is that if I ask myself to do something that's not the me that was wired in my youth, then it doesn't know how to do it. It's sort of like telling a horse to go somewhere, but there's no trail and it doesn't know how to get there. Yeah. So how does a dolphin trainer actually do it, or a dog trainer, or any animal trainer? It's amazing. So pigeons, this was first developed from pigeons long ago. So if you give a pigeon or any animal, like let's say they turn its head a little bit this way and you give them a treat, then they'll turn their head more and more and more that way. And in a second, they'll be spinning in a whole circle in an effort to get another and another treat. And then it has learned to spin in a circle, and it will only take one treat to get a whole pirouette out of them. And so this is the way we can train ourselves. Give ourselves small steps that we can easily take, and give ourselves a tiny treat and do it again and again, and no cheating. So you can't give yourself the treat when you didn't do the small step.
Yes. So it's as simple as that, as sitting down and saying, I'm going to take these incremental steps towards this type and style of behavior, one baby step at a time. And when I make that one step, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. And when I make that second step, I'm going to have a nice piece of fruit or a glass of wine or something, like literally the fundamental steps such as that.
Yes, exactly. And you may think there's no simple way to define these small steps, but you can do it. And I'll give you a funny example of how I learned that. You may have had this experience too. I'm at the dentist, and the dentist is pressuring me to floss my teeth. Yeah. And, the first time I tried to floss my teeth, I was like, what? I can't do this. This is too hard. I can't believe anybody does this. So he says to me, and he didn't make up this line. This is like in the dentist's handbook. He said, promise me that you will just floss one tooth.
Right.
So you can't say no to that. And then after you do that, then you feel like a jerk, So, but it's a simple way to overcome, what may have been called resistance in the past. Yeah. And then to reward yourself for that, I loved exactly the way you said it, because you could pat yourself on the back, but for a horse, like a pat is not enough all the time to get the horse to do something. So then you could give it a cookie, you could give it a glass of wine, and people listening may say, oh, but then I just do nothing but eat cookies all the time or drink the whole bottle of wine. But the bottom line is you are in control of your own incentive structure. And you're teaching your inner mammal, hey, you can earn another glass of wine, you can earn another cookie, and you give yourself a wide variety of rewards. And that's what I explain in my book, is all of my books, how to develop a variety of rewards so you don't overindulge in the cookies or the wine. And for example, what I use is listening to comedy.
Right. Oh, I love it. It's interesting. We're both the same on that. I'm not a big social media person. I am present on social media. I don't consume a lot, which is a little bit of a dichotomy, I know. But every now and again, if I've had a good day, and well, every day is a good day, but when I'm feeling especially good, I'll go onto Facebook, and they do these reels on my phone, and they do these reels about, it's like 2 or 3 scrolls down. I don't have to scroll too far. And then, of course, they understand what I'm consuming, so they just present, and it's a series of comedians, basically. And then when one of these comedies, one of these skits goes off, it provides me with, they basically double up, and I just get an opportunity to laugh just before I go to bed. And I'm thinking, yeah, that was my treat, exactly as you say.
Exactly. That's perfect. And so a person listening, and you've just given me a great idea, is just put in the word comedians in the search bar. And I
Yeah,
have to say that some comedians, I can't laugh because they have a sort of a bitter, hostile message that I think is dysfunctional.
yeah,
So then I have to search. And so you don't want to get upset before you go to bed. So I even will curate a list in advance.
yeah.
But some people listening may say, well, I don't have time to listen to comedians. And so I always say, yeah, but then you maybe have time for this other bad habit. So the idea is to plan your own reward structure and maybe watch an animal training class so you can learn how really structured it is.
Yeah, definitely. I love it when I speak to almost anyone, mostly clients or students that I have, and someone says, I don't have time to, I just say, let's substitute the word have for make. And they're like, no, but you don't understand. I really don't have time. Let's just use the word make. And having them literally say it out loud, I don't make time for my own reward system. I don't make time to sit down and actually figure out what that structure could look like. I don't make time. It has such a profound effect when they're kind of thinking, what do I make time for? And it is those unhealthy habits. I have to just tell you, when you were talking about the dentist there, I've just been reading a book on, I think it's actually on business coaching, so I don't even know where this came from, but it's a similar analogy where the parent takes the kid to the dentist, and then says, you need to brush your teeth, and the kid says, well, like, what teeth do I need to brush then? I'm not gonna do exactly as you tell me, but what teeth? And then the dentist says, just the ones you want to keep. you know and I love that. So flossing would be the exact same example, just the ones you want to keep. You get to choose, it's up to you. So then, in terms of, we talked earlier, certainly in the bio and just a wee bit in the beginning, about our brains are inherited from our ancestors who had a completely different lifestyle to us, in terms of the dangers that were present, in terms of access to safety and security, in terms to essentially what was important to them. How can we, with this ancestral inheritance that we've had, what strategies do you recommend that people employ to help us break free of some of those ingrained patterns that no longer serve our needs, and move towards more positive, thinking and actions?
Sure. So the first thing is to know that your unwanted pattern is a real physical pathway in your brain. And the reason you use this pathway is because the electricity in your brain flows like water in a storm. It just flows into the biggest pathways that are there. And when you built that pathway, you were probably 7 years old or younger or during puberty, because that's when our neuroplasticity peaks. And those big neural highways that we build during our myelin years, they create life or death feelings because, you're a little kid and you think, my survival depends on this, because your survival chemicals are turning on and off and you can't see a bigger picture. And so that's the neural network that all of us are running on, is whatever we built when we were young. So we can change that old neural highway that is giving us trouble, but it's hard. So the simple answer is you can only change like one at a time, and you have to feed your brain the new behavior. You can't just curse the old behavior, because then you'll just be hating yourself and your horse will feel hated, So it's like taking the horse on the new trail, giving him a carrot, putting them on a new trail, and they may not like the trail, but when the horse follows a new trail every day, not only will it become the new normal, but a trail gets established so it's easier to pass. And it's first you have to be able to narrow down what is the new behavior that I want. And again, we talked about how I can slice that into small bits and reward myself for each bit.
So someone, say for example, someone doesn't know, they understand the concept. I have to do, like a rewards framework of some description. I understand, I want to stop doing this, I want to start doing that, but I have no idea where to start. I have no idea what ground zero should be, where I think, what measures of success to put into place, how I should share this, if at all, with my community in terms of support and a support system and such. What would your recommendation be to someone that says, I think I get it, I just don't know how to even get any sort of start and momentum thereafter?
Sure. Well, I would suggest start with something small to prove to yourself that you have power over your brain. So what would small be? Well, use a cliched example. If a person smokes cigarettes and wants to rewire themselves to not smoke cigarettes, they could start by saying, okay, I'm going to give up the cigarette after dinner, or I'm going to give up the first cigarette in the morning or something, because it's that impulse of I want, and then I'm going to redirect that feeling of I want into, it's effectively building an exit ramp from the old highway in your brain to building a new highway. And once you build that new exit ramp and new highway for anything, then you say, oh, I can do it. And then you can build more and more of them. But start with one that's important to you, but small enough that you can chew it.
Yeah. And what would you see, or what do you see with people that you work with or people you interact with, that becomes the biggest barrier for them to make the discernible progress? Because like everything, progress isn't linear. It's not in a perfectly straight line where we say, yeah, look at this. This is absolutely perfect. It's a squiggly line and there's some back steps and side steps and such. But what do you see as being the biggest barriers that people can expect during their journey that are not the end, that are not, you're a failure, you're a loser, why did you even try this? Just go back to what you were doing. What do you typically, what's the most common things that you see?
Well, there are not a lot of people saying what I'm saying, and there are so many people saying our society is the problem. So it's so easy to get sucked into that, why should I be working so hard? The problem is in our society, and society needs to change. It's not me that needs to change. That message is so seductive. So who's not going to go into that? So to use the example I used about the morning cigarette, it's a tobacco company's fault for making this cigarette so attractive. And if you think that all your friends and relatives are going to pat you on the back and say, yeah, it's the tobacco company's fault, and And you could take that example for, everything else you could think of. And everyone can, I always say, you can think of 10 examples in 10 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so what you're talking about is ownership, is
Yeah.
people saying, now it's time to change. I have had years of pointing in different directions about different things. I am now willing to put the work in and the investment in because I'm worth it, because other people need me, because of whatever the reason and motivation for doing that. In terms of once you take that ownership, is that the beginning of the journey of the changing of the chemicals from not serving to serving?
Yes, but I would say when you say I need to change, you can't change a lot. So you don't want to have this like total rejection of yourself
Yeah,
because to be honest, it's so hard to change our old neural pathways that think about if you're digging a new highway, you're not going to say, well, let's just get rid of the whole highway system in Scotland and
yeah,
build a new one. But we're going to say, let's just build one little exit ramp and one little new road,
yeah,
And then you could narrow down and invest your effort into the new behavior with a sense of accomplishment rather than this sense of self-rejection.
yeah,
And I'll give a simple example of I had problems with anxiety, social anxiety, and I did this exercise for myself of making eye contact with store clerks when I'm paying for something and getting my change, that I would look them in the eye.
yeah,
And I would notice that, like, I would have strong feelings about this. And then it helped me deal with those feelings in a safe context
yeah,
that wasn't loaded with all the daily problems. And then I had all the necessary insights like, oh, I'm creating a bad feeling when they don't look back at me, but they're just busy with their own life and it has nothing to do with me. It's
yeah.
just a simple example.
I love that example. Many years ago, I read an autobiography from a famous boxer back in the UK, and George Foreman, the world heavyweight, ex-world heavyweight champion who just passed away recently, was with him in some way, and he was signing a bunch of autographs. This guy called Chris Eubank, he's signing a bunch of autographs, and then he came out afterwards, and George Foreman said, "How do you think that went?" And he says, "I think it went great. I didn't stop until everyone got signed what they wanted signed, or got a photograph. It was kind of before the selfie culture and such." And George Foreman said to him, "You never created one connection. You never looked one person in the eye." He was so concentrating on, give me the shirt, give me the hat, give me the photograph, whatever it is you want me to sign, and I'll sign it, and never looked up. Never
Yeah.
looked up,
Yeah.
and I must have read that honestly, Dr. Loretta, probably about 25 years ago, and it stuck with me ever since, to try and just make sure as much as possible that when I'm present and fully recall and want to make sure that the experience is memorable, that people get what they're getting, and you just never know the impact it's going to have both on you and on the other person that just felt seen for
Yes, yes.
a second.
But again, now to for not everyone listening should have this as their first goal, even though, there are a lot of
Yeah,
social messages pressuring this, but some people are over invested in the other person and making the other person happy. And their first goal might be to not make the eye contact and not over identify with the other person. So each person can decide, why is it so hard to just narrow down to one? I use the simple example that if you try to learn a foreign language in adulthood, it takes a huge amount of work and
yeah,
most people give up.
yeah.
Yet when we were children, we learned our first language easily. So
Yes.
the brain does not build new pathways easily in adulthood. And
Yeah.
that's why, like, you have to really decide where you're going to invest that shoveling to build the new road rather than just shoveling everywhere.
Yeah.
And an example of what I was saying, a lot of people criticize doctors for not connecting enough. But imagine like if you're a doctor and you spend your day telling people that they have cancer.
Yeah.
Like that's not fair to expect the doctor to feel the feeling of the other person all day, every day. It's just not realistic.
Yeah.
So each person has to choose that new pathway that's right for them.
Yeah, definitely. How much would you say social community should be part of your journey of the rewiring or retraining? Do you see a lot of success that people have with sharing their message, which would then hopefully come back to them as encouragement and at least conversation, if nothing else? Or do you believe that it's quite an individualistic thing, especially in the beginning, to get yourself going and gain momentum?
Well, I'm very happy to hear your question because the new book I'm writing is on herd behavior.
Oh,
And
nice.
it's very valuable for people to understand this. So the answer sort of is both.
Right.
So our brain is always choosing between I want the safety of social support and I want greener pasture. And it's important to know that animals are not in a herd all the time. In fact, it's bad for them to be in a herd all the time. They end up eating grass that was peed on and they get sick. So
Ah,
they would rather distance themselves.
yeah.
And, when they try to eat and they're too close to others and they'll butt horns. So they go off to greener pastures and then a predator can get them in an instant
Yeah.
if they're too far away. So that's why we always have this anxious seesaw between I don't want to be too far away, but I don't want to be too close. And when you're too close, they get on your nerves and you want to be farther away. But when you're farther away, you feel like you're going to be eaten by a predator.
Yeah.
So there's no right thing for all times, but I just remind myself all the time, an animal with a tiny brain like a gazelle is making this decision with every step. They're taking a step either closer to the group or away from the group. And so I can make that decision every minute also, and I can just learn to feel good about it instead of thinking that I should have both all the time and then always being upset that I don't.
Yeah, yeah, and in managing and engaging in your inner self-talk to make sure that you give yourself grace and say, I think this is going to work, and if it doesn't, we can course correct. We can move closer to the herd. We can move further away, depending on what that looks like. I love that. I love such a vivid way to explain things and using the animal references as well. And I hope that truly resonates with the audience. So, Dr. Loretta, you know that this is the Best You podcast. And what I like to do is ask everyone what regular practice you employ to give Dr. Loretta the best opportunity of being Dr. Loretta.
Oh, thank you. I could have a habit of expecting too much from myself.
Yeah.
And I've learned that if I try to do something when I'm already exhausted, then I'm going to just end up not liking what I did and throwing it out and doing it over. So I save my hardest challenges for first thing in the morning. And if I have any fun tasks, I save them for afternoon. And then I do non-threatening things at night, or I intersperse them throughout the day so that if I have a really hard task, then maybe I do a fun task so that it's sort of like a horse. If you're whipping it all the time, it's going to end up just ignoring you.
Yeah.
And the funny thing I have to say, like, it's hard. Like, how do we have that many fun tasks? People may think, well, I don't have that many fun tasks.
Yeah.
So I cut onions. So I know that I'm going to need to cut onions for dinner. And if it's just work and it's like, oh, another thing and another thing. But if I've been sitting for an hour working, then to just stand up on my feet and cut onions and fry the onions and taste them again and taste them again. And I have a lot of tastes, and my inner mammal likes that. And then then I can keep working until dinner time because the dinner's already cooked.
Yeah. Oh, what a powerful example. I love it. Before I let you go, Dr. Loretta, where can people find out more about you?
Thanks. InnerMammalInstitute.org. InnerMammalInstitute.org. And I have a free 5-day happy chemical jumpstart. So if you go to the bottom of the page, you can put your email and you'll get 1 email a day for 5 days, one on each chemical and how to find your power over it. And you'll also get my newsletter. And of course, you can unsubscribe easily if you want.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I have learned an absolute ton in the very short time that we've been together. It's been such a revelation. Thank you very, very much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for the fabulous questions.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.